Welcome to the Experience Oldsmar podcast. I'm your host, Mayor Dan Saracki, broadcasting from the top of the bay in beautiful downtown Oldsmar in the old Oldsmar Bank building. My guest today is not only an Oldsmar resident, but is respected worldwide for tracking the tropics. Mike Boylan created his website, spaghettymodels.com, to provide the public an opportunity to explore weather models throughout the year. He is also the host of Mike's Weather Page social media channels. I call him Mr. Hurricane Expert. Thank you for being here, Mike. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm an expert, but I appreciate that. That was a nice intro.
Well,
it means a lot. Appreciate it.
We'll get into that because I'm going to tell you a couple of stories why you're the expert.
All right.
But I understand you are a Florida native. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Bradenton, Florida, right off the Manatee River. Very few folks are like me that have lived in Florida their whole life. So I get that reaction all the time, like, wow, you're a native, you know. My folks moved up here when I was in elementary school, went to Curlew Creek Elementary, went to Palm Harbor Middle, and then I graduated from East Lake High School. So I'm a local yokel, as my dad would call it.
Wonderful. And then what was the Tampa Bay area? Were you in Oldsmar at that time? Where were you when growing up?
Yeah, I was in Palm Harbor, just a few miles away. I raced radio control cars, was a huge hobby of mine. There was an old racetrack at the flea market in the 80s, and so we drove through Oldsmar all the time. And I remember it being a 2-lane road. I remember the boot ranch was a boot, and it was a cattle farm. And when you drove by the boot ranch, they had an RC playing field, and I used to just look over there, and they would race around these pylons. So it was always cool to come and watch that. But it was all 2-lane roads. There was a lot of country back then, and I've seen it progress from a 2-lane road to 4-lane to a 6-lane highway.
Nice.
Through the years.
How did the weather become a hobby for you?
Well, I think, growing up, just living in Florida, you always have storms heading our way. So I would love the cone of uncertainty. Like I would wake up and see Jim Cantori, and like couldn't wait for the latest tropical update and just get that excitement, like, oh, we got a possible hurricane coming or a storm, and I would actually, a lot of old timers will tell you they used to set their watches to the thunderstorms. And I remember growing up as a kid, 3:00, those storms would roll in, and you could almost plan on those storms rolling in, eat dinner at 5, and by 7 you go back out and you play in the streets with the water. So I always remember that as a kid, how fascinating it was for the afternoon thunderstorms to like set your routine at night.
That's great. Great story. So let's talk about your college. What was your major?
I went to business marketing and thought I was going to be an engineer. Didn't know what I wanted to do. No, I don't think any kid, at least my little circle, nobody knew what they wanted to do until I got that calculus book one day. And I'm like, nope, not for me. So I got in love with marketing. It was the year of the Budweiser Frogs. It was Super Bowl. I got intrigued with the commercials, and my head said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm loving it. I love marketing and kind of market myself with this whole weather thing. It seems like. Well,
just so you know, I'm very involved in the Florida League of Cities. And when I'm there, they talk about you your weather. There's a lot of elected officials around the state that love your website and they follow you. What encouraged you to start your website and weather company to keep citizens updated?
So it was 2004. We had a storm called Hurricane Charlie coming to Tampa, and we were home. I was, just got married, so we were married 3 years. So now I was like a homeowner, and I'm like, oh, I got to be responsible here because we got a hurricane coming, and it was really hard to find information back then. I knew that there was things called spaghetti models. The internet was fresh. I don't even think Google was around then. There used to be like Lycos or something, like a cow. I don't remember, but finding stuff was impossible. The internet was new, so I was learning a little bit of HTML website design in college, and so I'm gonna make a website, call it Mike's Weather Page, and it was for me just to have all my links that I need to track Hurricane Charlie, and it was every time I found a new picture, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna put it on the page, and so that was the birth. It was a one-stop shop to go see the latest models and hurricane maps from the National Hurricane Center, and it was just shared amongst friends and family. It was just mainly a easy spot to go and get data for the storm.
So how did you come up with the name? Just the spaghetti models? Is that what you wanted to call it?
Yeah,
or?
no, that's actually for the first 3 years, it was a subdomain of another website that I had. It wasn't even searchable. It was like a hidden site, and I just got the idea one day of spaghetti models because I love spaghetti models, and that's those little squiggly lines that they show on TV. You know, all the possibilities of where a storm's going to go. Those are spaghetti models. Yeah, so it's like, and I couldn't spell spaghetti for 10 years, and thank goodness Google fixes your correction now because people used to tell me all the time you should make it easier because nobody can spell spaghetti. So now, luckily, I bought Mike's weather page too, and it'll hyperlink back to spaghetti models.
So you got both perfect,
Yeah.
both perfect names. It's kind of funny you talked about Hurricane Charlie in 2004 because when I had just been here for a couple of years, I had no idea what to do, and they said it was coming to Tampa. Mm-hmm. So my daughter had a house down in Fort Myers, so I went to her house. Well, it hit us. I mean, thank God she had hurricane shutters because it blew off some of her shingles on her roof, and that storm was crazy. Yeah, the palm trees were hitting the ground, boom, boom, outside, and it was just a crazy storm. So I know all about it.
Yeah, well, back then the internet was not that popular, and I remember they made that turn at the last second. Everybody was focused on Tampa, and all of a sudden, local meteorologists are like, "Hey, this thing's turning a little bit," and people down there were caught off guard. I remember Don Germais, I think his name was. He did the infamous Hunker Down. ABC was there, and I'll never forget watching him as a storm chaser. And maybe that's where it clicked for me. Down the road, I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to be the hunker down guy in the hurricane. But yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. Here it is, 18 years later.
And my daughter lost power for I don't know how long, about a week. But I helped her clean up. We cleaned up everything, and then we had to go home to Tampa, of course. And the 75 was just crazy.
Yeah.
People, it was crazy. All right, let's keep going. Mike's weather page. Grown over the years on Facebook. What's your social media platforms? What social media platforms are you on?
All of them now. I used to have all my eggs in one basket with Facebook. Other people, I've found out some people like Twitter. Expanded big time on YouTube. YouTube's getting really large. A lot of folks only live on YouTube now. They have YouTube TV. So I'm glad I'm on that. I have to comb my hair now because people tell me that they watch me on their 80-inch TVs, So I had to be conscious about that. And then also, like I said, I have a TikTok account and an Instagram account. So basically 5 social channels.
That'll keep you busy.
Oh my God. And, and everybody's got there's a different crowd on every one of them.
Yeah, it'll keep you busy. So as I told you before, a lot of people from the Florida League of Cities around all elected officials follow you. How many followers do you have combined, do you think?
It's just a little bit over 2 million if you add them all up. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's amazing. You won the Tropical Meteorology Award at the Governor's Hurricane Conference. What makes this a special award for you?
Oh, good question, Mayor. The hardest struggle I've had growing this Mike's weather page, through the years has been credibility. I always advertise I'm not official, not a real meteorologist. I'm self-taught, and everybody knows that. But you get the haters, obviously, because my numbers are growing. But to get that award, it's usually given to NOAA, National Weather Service people. I think I was the first civilian to win it. It's always been reserved for like people in the industry. So, and it's actually voted upon by a lot of people in the industry to get that award. So to get that, recognition, who I was kind of like the credibility I needed, to say, hey, this Mike is legit. At least, it's another source for information and to be accredited. And really the next year, the Florida Division of Emergency Management reached out and they wanted to do a Zoom call with Mr. Kevin Guthrie on the page. And I was like, man, to have the state reach out and trust, me on their platforms meant a lot. So those helped me, I think, at least kind of shut the naysayers down a little bit, and leave me alone.
Well, with having over 2 million viewers and what I've learned about you in the last couple of years, you deserve that award, and the city of Oldsmar is very honored to have you here in our city, and we're grateful for that. And that award was well-deserving to you from the governor. That's actually pretty special.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You have made a name for yourself by actually storm chasing various weather events. What is the most memorable chase?
Oof. So, yeah, this is something I don't think my wife agrees with 100%, but something inside me, I tracked them online, and I eventually one day said I got to be out there. So, probably the scariest moment for me was Hurricane Ida. I went up to Louisiana alone. I don't know what I was thinking, solo, and the eye wall was coming, and those bridges over the Mississippi. I don't know if you've ever driven in Louisiana. The bridges are very tall, very old, and I was racing to find a spot. This hurricane's coming. I don't know where I'm going. These roads go for 20 miles with no side. And I had a moment there. I was like, "What are you doing, Mike? Going over this bridge. I mean, the truck's like moving around, and I'm pulling up close to the side, thinking, well, if it does flip, at least I won't flip too far, And so I got to safety, and it was kind of like I learned to plan a little more ahead where I'm going to go ahead of the storm. I kind of got there a little too late and didn't have a plan. Now I have a plan where I'm going to go. Ian, I wrote it out, went to the north side, stayed away from the surge. A lot of storm chasers got wrapped up in the surge at Fort Myers Beach. At least I've learned enough now to stay away from that, not put myself in harm's way.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So,
well, that's a great story. Thank you so much. So let's talk about our hometown of Oldsmar. It's hurricane season's coming around the corner. We're in it now, and it's gonna. We're concerned. We almost saw what happened last year. So what would it be? What would be the worst hurricane scenario for the city of Oldsmar? What would that be?
What I've seen in Fort Myers, I think complacency is going to be a word that nobody's probably thought I'd say, and this is because we are in the worst possible spot for a hurricane. Like Tampa Bay, shallow shelf, all that water in the bay has nowhere to go but up, and unfortunately towards us. We had Charlie turn, Irma turn, Ian turn. I am so worried that if we do get the next hurricane that's approaching, our residents aren't going to, they're going to say, I'm not going to waste my time evacuating. But what scares me is this water. 90% roughly 90% of all hurricane deaths are water related. The wind, you hide from the wind, but it's water. The water is the killer. And unfortunately for us, I don't know, around town we have these water markers. There's one at Forest Lakes Elementary. There's one off of Limeball. Those are real life water scenarios that we could become connected to Lake Tarpon watershed. And Pinellas County could be an island. And that would only be a Category 3. So the perfect storm would come to our north. Twice now our bay's emptied out of water. Once during Irma, once during Ian.
Yep.
Storm went to our south. And the way that the winds work counterclockwise, it basically blew the winds out of the bay. So our worst thing that scares me is a storm to the north, and all that water turns in. And we had Tropical Storm Eta in 2020. It was 60 miles off our coast, and we had the record surge in Tampa Bay. We had homes flooded. 1,000 homes were flooded along Pinellas County. We had some here in Oldsmar, and it was a tropical storm, never even made landfall. And it was a high tide. So that kind of told you, what could happen, and that was a nothing storm. So, it scares me. 1921, our bank that we're in now was underwater, and this is quite a bit, it's about a mile from the bay,
right?
So that we have gotten hit. Oldsmar was flattened in 21, and it will, unfortunately, Mother Nature will repeat herself.
Right, and unfortunately, Ari Olds left. He left the city because of that, and he gave up his dream. So, but we're still here. So let's talk about, people got to be prepared. With hurricane season upon us, how should everyone prepare? Know your zones.
Yep. Very important.
Sign up for Alert Pinellas. Evacuate when mandated. Let's talk about that for a minute. Because the last hurricane we had, people didn't leave. No. Can you talk about how important it is to leave?
I've learned, so storm chasing's taught me one thing. Seeing things firsthand versus just telling you is different than seeing it firsthand. I've seen things firsthand now. I made my wife evacuate and my mom and dad. Like, that's serious because that water scares me. And what happened down in Fort Myers, some people didn't have enough time because they got the, maybe decision that they made was 12 hours out. So what would scare me here in Oldsmar is, this thing's going to turn. They always turn, 6 hours before it's not turning, right? I don't even know how you evacuate 1 million people out of Pinellas County. I mean, traffic now is the worst I've ever seen it. So don't get stranded. I talked to people firsthand at Fort Myers that just turned around and came home. Alligator Alley was bumper to bumper, 70. It's like, how stressed you are now. You imagine sitting in traffic knowing that hurricane's 4 hours away and you're stuck in traffic. So, I'm not saying use me as a source, but, National Hurricane Center, I think the best advice to give anybody is to almost have to educate yourself. Like, you're presented with the facts. You're presented with all these spaghetti models. You're presented with the cone. You almost have to make that decision well enough ahead of time so you could beat that mad rush out of here. Right. And if it doesn't hit us, guess what? You got a free night hotel somewhere and live it up.
Right, exactly.
So just don't fall into that trap. it hasn't hit us, because that's what happened down south. 200 people, I think, plus died that rode out Charlie, and they said, it's going to be nothing. Every storm's different. Charlie was just a little guy that fit in the eye of Ian. And the locals down there, complacency. I've been through it. I'll be okay. And no, these water maps are real. We will be underwater.
So let's talk about an evacuation plan. As I told you before, I went to Fort Myers when Charlie hit, and I was right in the middle of that storm. It was devastating to the whole area. When you talk about an evacuation plan, let's say it's coming towards Oldsmar, where will we go? North, Orlando, where?
Well, I think the new advice is family or friends, get away from the water. Again, they're not suggesting go hundreds of miles away, because the whole idea is to get away from the water. Unfortunately for us in the peninsula, everybody evacuated to Orlando during Charlie and also with Ian. And guess what? The hurricane goes right over the top of you, and you're still stuck with no power. Roads are a mess. So if you live on immediate water, I think the number one goal for safety is to just get away from the water, But as far as anybody else, I would just get the heck, if it's going to the Panhandle, go south. I've told a lot of people in the past, like, if we know that storm's going to the north, you can go to the south, to get away from it. But the traffic's a nightmare. So it's almost like you're going to ride it out. Friends and family is smart suggestions, because you can all ride it out together, and hopefully somebody's got a generator. Mm-hmm. And plan ahead. Like, what I usually do is, some people make hotel reservations way in advance. Like, this thing's got a chance. Make a hotel reservation. It doesn't hurt. You can always cancel it.
Great idea.
The other thing is make sure these are pet-friendly hotels. A lot of folks take their pets with them, and then they realize they can't take them. So it's almost like part of that, get a plan ahead of time, is like, okay, what if we are getting a hurricane? Where are we going to go? We're going to go to Cousin Bob's in Orlando. And
so when you say get away, would away from the water, would Plant City, Zephyr Hills, Dade City, like that's close enough, right? Yeah. Something like that, right?
Yeah, even 20, 30 miles.
Yeah, because then you're north east, and you're out of the way, away from the water. And,
right.
Okay.
Right. And that's your choice for safety, for life. Like I said, 90% of deaths are usually water related. What happened with Ian, we had Arcadia was flooded. So he almost got to look at history and not, obviously not go to an area that's got a big river or inland flooding, because there were St. John's River in North Florida got flooded. So we're in a bad spot in Florida. If it was me personally, I'd probably go way past the Panhandle. Mm-hmm. I'd go to the Panhandle and make a turn west, and just have no chance of getting stuck without power and water.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. So let's say there's a lot of residents that say, I'm sticking it out. Supplies, what should they get so they are prepared in case there's a crazy storm hits us?
Yeah, I think the going thing now is like enough for 7 days, food and water. Pet supplies, medicines are huge. A lot of people don't plan ahead with medicines, pet medicines, of course, water, fresh water. The evacuation kits, I have links for them. The biggest thing is X amount of days per person. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure you can ride it out for several days, because you won't have fresh water probably. And the biggest thing, though, are your medicines. Having things like half a tank of gas is a great. My dad told me this, actually, and I heard it from a big expo, is that starting hurricane season right now, we're in July, August time frame, always have a half a tank of gas in your car, because if something were to happen, that's enough to get you pretty far out of harm's way. But, if you're empty and all of our gas runs out, so the good advice I heard, it helps some people, is start out the whole season with at least some gas in your car. So if you have to evacuate, you're not panicking.
Gotcha.
If you have a generator, a lot of people don't know this, you got to have gas or propane, so make sure you got, your cans of gas ready to go, because gas is going to be short supply. And always have your extension cords figured out. Never run a generator in a house. Number one death for a lot of storms were generator safety, and carbon monoxide is the silent killer. So a lot of folks don't know that. Generators got to be several, I think it's 20 feet or 30 feet, I'm not sure officially, but way away from your house, not your garage, not the patio. So you got to have extension cords. A lot of folks don't know that. Mm-hmm. Your cell phones, you need to have charging battery banks are your best friend. Weather radios, you can buy that are solar powered, which I suggest highly.
Good. Wonderful. That's great advice for everybody. So I want to share a quick story with the listeners about you and I. So you were having dinner one night at the Oldsmar Tap House when it was there, and you're with your daughter, and you guys were eating dinner, and I stopped in, and I said, Mike, what do you think about that hurricane? It's going to miss us. And you said it was just getting started down by Puerto Rico, and you said, Dan, it's a bad one. I have a bad feeling. You said it like 3 times. It's a bad feeling. It's coming for us. What were you thinking at that point?
I remember, because you were going out of town, if I recall, and I'm like, man, we might have a hurricane while you're gone, and that's a lot of what I do is long-range forecast. That's how much I believe in spaghetti models, and they were already lining up then, the high pressures, low pressures, and you start to just have that gut feeling from history. This is maybe the one, So there is a lot of data with spaghetti models and knowing how to read them. But with that particular storm, it was the water was hot, everything was just everything for the perfect storm was lining up, and unfortunately, we had to worry about something called rapid intensification here in Florida, and that's the Gulf waters are very warm. We have these things called loop eddies, loop currents, and these storms blow up at the last second. Most of them come from a tropical storm 3 days out. Last thing I'll leave you here is the most amazing stat ever, but there's been 10 hurricanes that hit the United States that were 150 mile an hour plus over the years. 9 of those were tropical storms 3 days out. So 3 days, they go from a tropical storm to 150 mile an hour plus. So that's where you have to really pay attention to forecasts. Biggest problem with Ian, it was supposed to be a hurricane when it made landfall. It was supposed to hit Friday. This is the last most important thing that I learned from Ian. All the forecasts, hurricane in the Panhandle, it's going to weaken on Friday landfall. People on the West Coast, even if it turns, it's going to hit Friday as a hurricane. In their mindset, the landfall was still going to be Friday as a hurricane. No, it was still a major hurricane 2 days before, and it turned, now it hit Wednesday because it was 2 days on that chart. Mm-hmm. Nobody thought about that. They're not like, oh, it's not going to hit Friday, it's going to hit Wednesday. And everybody was caught with their pants down.
I remember that the news kept saying it's coming to Oldsmar, it's coming to Oldsmar, it's coming right, and they were calling me on the phone. But we're blessed. The city, our city's been
20
blessed.
miles. Remember we were talking before the show?
Yeah.
So the graphic 20 miles shift is all we had from Fort Myers to Oldsmar. So you think about that in the scope of things because of the angle of approach.
20 miles. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And unfortunately, it's not. If it's going to happen for us, it's wind, and we just have to be prepared.
And then the water's going to come up because of the wind.
Yep, wind and surge.
All right, let's pray that doesn't happen. But I thank you again. Anything else you want to share before we close here?
No, just you got plenty of time with hurricanes. I think of all the natural disasters, it's the least one to be concerned about. Tornadoes, you have very little time to prepare. Earthquakes, tsunamis, wildfires. So hurricanes, you got a lot of time. You got no excuse really, other than not wanting to leave. At least with hurricanes, you got enough time to get out and prepare your family, and material things can be replaced. Just don't be that cowboy thinking that this isn't going to happen to us, because it will happen to us one day. It did happen one day, and it will again.
Let's keep working together. Thank you, Mike, for coming out.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being my guest today. To find a list of podcast segments, visit experienceoldsmar.com. I'm your host, Oldsmar Dan Saracki. Until next time, I invite you to check out all the great things you can do to truly experience the city of Oldsmar. And stay safe hurricane season. Thank you so much. Mike, again, thanks. You are the best.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hurricane, thank you.